everyone, and welcome to this NAGDA Connect conversation. Today, we're starting something new. This is the first in a series of recorded conversations with thought leaders from the public DC plans industry. The idea behind this series is that all throughout the year, we'll be talking about we'll take some deeper dives into different ways that the industry is trying to solve our most fundamental problem. And that is, what do public employees really need from their DC plans? So this is a very complex question to answer at a national level because we understand the diversity of public retirement systems throughout the country. And there are a lot of ideas from a lot of different people about how best to address the needs of public employees. So that's why we wanted to run this as a series to invite several different voices from around the industry to explain their best ideas for the public sector and for public sector retirement. We thought the best place to start on something this complex was with an overview. So joining me today to help kick things off by talking about the emerging trends in public DC plans is a longtime friend of the organization and one of the premier thinkers in the industry, David Levine, principal at Groom Law Group. David, welcome.
Matt, thank you for having me.
Good to see you as always.
Good to see you as well.
So we talk a lot about, NAGDA's been talking about for a long time, the evolution of DC plans and how the role of DC plans is evolving as DB plans have changed. So there's a nearly constant stream of changes to DB plans, usually to reduce the generosity of the guaranteed benefit. And our thesis is that this necessitates some changes to the way that we think about the function of DC plans in the retirement picture for public employees. So we're going to talk about some of those aspects today of what that rethinking is in a bit. But first, let's start with how the DC plans industry itself is changing. So there's a lot of change among the companies in the space. So we're seeing a substantial evolution in both the record keeping side and the advisor space as companies consolidate. Can you talk a little bit about what's happened in the last couple of years, especially among companies that are involved with us, and how do you see those trends continuing to play out in the future?
Absolutely. And I thank you everybody for joining today. I think a key thing to keep in mind is consolidation in a lot of industries is common, but it's really hit our industry, especially affecting governmental plans in recent years. The number of record keepers who focus on the governmental plan market has shrunk down, which means you may have more efficient, more, I'll say, sophisticated providers there, but your options and your total number may be down, which could impact the dynamics you have in terms of what those opportunities are. Similarly, in the advisor side of the house, there's been a lot of so-called roll-ups, and whether it's advisor, consultant, we all use different terms, but it's all in the same type of bucket. There's been a lot of M&A, whether it has been on the brokerage and the small plan size, but in the governmental space, you've mainly had, I'll say, sort of professionalized advisors as well as consultants. Both I'll say the mid-sized advisors and the large consultants, even the very institutional ones, have seen the drive to merge. What does that mean? There can be great opportunities in terms of new services and deeper benches, but there's also questions of what else is being put into the play? What is the role of ancillary and other services that are being offered? And how do you, as a public plan sponsor and public plan fiduciaries, decide how to move forward? So it is an evolving landscape, and it is definitely changing the nature of some relationships. Some relationships won't change, but some are changing because we are facing a world where, in a sense, it's gone from sort of a little mom and poppy type of style world to a lot more sort of industrial commercialized. And that doesn't mean it's bad, but it means thinking about how you relate to your service providers continues. The good news, a lot of your governmental entities that are listening to this, you already have purchasing teams and government contracting. So a lot of that is well set up for a world of consolidation because you've already dealt with that in other areas with your contracting teams.
Yeah, so it's an evolving landscape outside of the government space, but obviously inside of the government space, it's the companies that are focused on us is certainly shrinking. And so as those companies evolve and as the viewpoint on those companies evolve and their perspective and what services they're providing, like you talked about, we're going to dive into some of those. So let's talk first about how some of the plan design elements are changing. So one of the things that we're hearing a lot about, and it makes a lot of sense in the government space, I think, is it's a very complex picture. You may or may not have Social Security your DB plan could look a number of different ways. Your DC plan could look a number of different ways. So helping somebody understand what to do with all those different pieces that make, that picture for the public employee and the retirement picture takes maybe some personalization, some advice, guidance. We kind of hear all of those different terms thrown out. What does that mean? What are you seeing in the public space that companies are doing to try to address some of that kind of help? I think would be the basic way to say it.
Absolutely, Matt. And I think there's a couple ways to sort of describe this. For a long time, 30, 40 years ago, you would hire a defined contribution provider and it'd be sort of all in and they do everything. And then in the 90s and 2000s, we hit, I almost describe it like the big bang, a star exploding. And everything became almost a la carte. It was very much like, hey, we will just be your record keeper. But with technology, price compression, other changes, we're moving back into a world where there's a lot more additional options and support services. So what you are seeing, and interestingly, it used to be that everybody was a little bit more in one lane. A record keeper might just do record keeping. A TPA might just do administration, and an advisor might just do investments. That's all broken down. And what we're seeing now is a world of, as you note, personalization, where different members of our community that want to support you and your plan are offering, whether it is individual advice and wellness type of services, or customized investment allocations, or even investment guidance to your participants and to your members. That's something we are seeing, and it's something I know you're going to take a deeper dive on in future sessions. In addition, there is not only advice, but there's actual control. You've seen a lot in the world about managed accounts, and there's been lots of discussions about different models. There's a lot of solutions out there. As I've said, some are offered by advisors, some are offered by record keepers, some are offered by third parties. We're not here today to say which one is the ideal solution, but the idea is to understand what your options are and how they work and what the structures are, both the economics and the return to your participants and value, both on any type of personalization or managed accounts. Plus, even though we have this constant tension in the world of retirement where we're worried about people not having enough money, there's also a countervailing pull to say, can we add more features to retirement plans? And what we have seen emerging are things like emergency savings solutions, and as well as student loan solutions that sometimes are tied into the plan, sometimes not. As we've talked a lot at NAGDA about Secure 2.0, made a lot of changes on this. And figuring out what works for your plan, what works for your governmental entity, how does it work in terms of security, privacy, cost, value. These are all things that I think are important for a governmental plan and its fiduciaries to really think about at this point as they move forward. So these are all options, and you may decide that all of these are good for your plan, none of them, but this is kind of our future of what is right and what is not for our plans. And I think these are something we'll come back to as we move forward.
They are, and especially as it relates to Secure 2.0, that's something obviously we've spent a lot of time on this past couple of years. And when we talk to the staff, when we go to DC, they're always saying, "Hey, is anybody using these things? Right? Is anybody actually putting these things into place?" And there is that trend of really trying to bolt on a lot of different options that plan sponsors can take advantage of, but it puts a little weight on the plan sponsor, right? To have to figure out which of those pieces do you grab to kind of, I think financial wellness is often the term that's used to try to build that whole picture for a public employee and really provide that entire suite of services that you hope they benefit from, and to make it attractive to be an employee in your organization. And we will dive deeper, especially I think advice, guidance, personalization, what that means in the public sector, whether it's somebody out in the field or whether it's a tool, is certainly, there are a lot of varieties. And I don't know if you want to get into any details of what you've seen or how you've seen that play out, but there's a pretty big span of different options that we've seen members used. And I think you mentioned managed accounts. Managed accounts is a really interesting feature as well when you think about how do you get all of those pieces under one hood to make sure that you can kind of have the best options in your DC plan based on everything that else that's happening in your financial picture. So a lot of very complex pieces, and I think that's what we've really seen as this landscape evolves, is that it does become more complex. And so those solutions become more complex, and the ideas become more complex, and the decisions for you, for your plan, as a plan sponsor, but also as a committee, to really sit down and work through, like, is this the right thing for my plan? That becomes a pretty complex conversation, I think.
I wholeheartedly agree. I won't go long on it, but to say with the evolution and going back to the consolidation and changes, it's figuring out what is right for your plan. And just like you negotiate your fees on record keeping, it's figuring out where do you add value, where do you not add value. It's like picking an investment. It's just a wider range of services to say what's the value add, what's the outcomes, and really valuing it. Because personalization can have some great value, whether it's managed accounts, whether it's student loans, these can have great value, but what is right for your plan and documenting the why is a very big thing that can help show value to your members, to your stakeholders, but also to really show you've done your fiduciary duty. So this is a whole
Right.
process as we go forward. But I know there's a lot more to discuss as you go forward.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and these cost money, right? I mean,
Yep.
typically these cost money. And so from a fiduciary standpoint, making sure that what they cost is justified by the benefit is going to be a very important, the most important piece of this, really. But so we talked a little bit about the plan design elements, kind of how to shape the plan. But as we see the evolution of DC plans in the public space, there's also a lot of investment decisions that have to be made. And it's a really interesting problem. And I think it's one that we honestly are really kind of just scratching the surface on thinking about is, you have these DB plans. Most of our members have DB plans out there that are building some kind of guarantee. What does that mean for the rest of your investment menu? What does it mean for the decisions you make? So you want to talk a little bit about what you're seeing out
Sure.
in the industry right now as those evolve, as those conversations evolve?
Absolutely. And governmental plans have long, both on the defined benefit, but here we're talking defined contribution side, been at the innovators. And when you have a DB plan, and some of you do, some of you don't, fully acknowledging that, there is the question of what type of investments best set up people for the future. For about a decade, there was a lot of focus on auto enrollment, auto increase. But now the question is, how do we actually get people in the decumulation phase after they retire to have enough money? And in the defined benefit space, we've historically had far more diversified portfolios of investments because retirement is not a short-term thing, it is a long-term thing. So that allows you to use a different investing horizon. And I know many of you who are sponsors probably rely on consultants and others. And the question is, how do you integrate in your plan's view of what the long-term goal is with also advice from smart investment professionals, because you're seeing a number of changes come in. We've seen everything, which has not been that common, but you've seen occasionally where sometimes if someone has a defined benefit and a defined contribution, they actually take some of their DB portfolio, their pension portfolio, and turn it into an investment option, the so-called unionization. There's a
Yeah.
lot to that. That could be a whole series of
Right.
webinars on itself. But there's also, to cut to the quick on a couple things, you're seeing a lot more, and this goes back to personalization, customization of target date funds, more customized models. Uh, the target date funds, whether active or passive, have all come down in price. And so same with balance funds. But the question is, they are very sort of a couple factor driven. Is there other ways to do it? And you're seeing a number of solutions that sort of try to slice and dice using more demographic data and other information on target date funds. The question is benchmarking, evaluating, implementing. That's something I'm seeing a lot of plans do. And in fact, without calling out any product, governmental plans have through some of the providers that are out there been for a long time doing customization of sort of TDF and allocation models that have been there. And governmental plans have been innovators, and some of their providers have been innovators. A second area where we're seeing a lot of growth is there's is the talk about alternatives in defined contribution. What does that mean?
Yeah.
To quickly level set that, what that means is for a long time in defined contribution, it's always been, what can you sell tomorrow? That's the idea. Something that can be immediately traded, publicly traded, easy to get in and out of. But the economy in the world has changed, especially in the United States. A large proportion of assets in the United States are now privately held. They're not traded on the stock market.
Mhm.
How do you put in alternative investments, whether it's private equity, private credit, private real estate that's just held? How do you do that? And real estate is a good bridge because we've for a long time had real estate investments in plans, but you're seeing a lot of interest in that. And I know I've spent a ton of time working in this area on these. A lot of the discussion there is how do they work? How can you get in and out? And there's some great solutions. Sometimes they work inside managed accounts or other personalization, but there can be other models as inside a target date. There's a lot of ways to approach it. So this is something that governmental plans, because you're not subject to some of the complexities of ERISA, but you still have fiduciary duties, a number of them are looking at. So this is going to be a hot topic. The last thing, and knowing we've spent a lot of time already, Matt, I'll try to be quick on this one, is income products, is lifetime income. I talked about accumulation and switching to decumulation. There's a lot of discussion of, can we integrate lifetime income to target dates? Can we offer it as a distribution option? As fiduciaries, there's understanding the outcomes impact, the value impact, the cost impact, who gets paid what and where impact. It doesn't mean they're bad because they can sometimes be more expensive, but they can also provide guarantees. And this is a whole discussion for us to have in your coming sessions, because a lot of these things are very much in the weeds. And as you point out, there are some stakeholders who probably will have some great insights on that as we go forward.
Yeah, and I think the thing that I want to really dive into the most as we get into each of these segments is what is different about the government market. You know, you talked a little bit about the customization of target date funds, balanced funds. That has been happening for a while because our members know their situation is different, right? We can't just take what's coming off the shelf from the general DC plans industry and bolt it into
No,
public DC plans industry. It's a very different situation. And I think when we talk about things like risk, you talk about things like what your glide path would be, or how a target date fund evolves over time. Alternatives is a great one. You know, how do you integrate that and why? Income products, especially, you know, when you have a DB plan, if you have a DB plan, and again, you're right, several of our members don't, but if you have a DB plan, how does that change your thinking about
right.
products? And, you know, or conversely, if you have, say, a hybrid plan with a mandatory DC, how do you think about an income product in that context? And is that different from somebody who just has a supplemental plan? So I think these are all, again, very complex issues. But that's why we wanted to spend some time on them and really get deeper on some of the concepts and understanding why these exist and how public plan sponsors can think about them in the future and have these conversations with their committees. So there's a lot to cover, as we've talked about. There's a lot to dive into. Any closing thoughts? Anything you want to kind of add at the end here as we shut this down?
Aside from encouraging people to listen to the future segments, I think the key here from my mind is, as a governmental plan sponsor, governmental fiduciary, governmental plan staff, some of these solutions can be amazing. It's really applying the same rigor and saying what will benefit our participants and beneficiaries, or our members and beneficiaries. What are the outcomes? How do you benchmark it? What are the costs? And who gets paid? And where does it take us in the end? What are we trying to achieve?
Right.
The key is, as I often say, there is no law saying it always has to be cheapest. There is no law saying it always has to be simplest, but it's figuring out what the right fit is for your plan. And there's some great options on the table, so it'll be great to go through these with everybody.
Yeah. And I think at the end of the day, what's the goal? What are you trying to accomplish with your DC plan? And is whatever you're adding, you know, whatever feature you're adding, however you're thinking about your investments, does it help to achieve that goal? So great stuff. Very much appreciate it, David. Always great to talk to you. Always great insights. Hopefully all of you who are tuned in enjoyed it, and we're gonna get into each of these sections as we go. If you have ideas and thoughts of something that we didn't talk about here, please let us know. We're gonna have a link when we send these out for you to have some input on what you'd like to hear us talk about throughout the year. So thanks a lot, everybody. Appreciate your time, and we'll see you soon.
Thank you so much.